Welcome to the Tom Golly official podcast. With me today is singer, songwriter, Christian artist, and a great friend of mine, Ross King. Hello, Ross.
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
It's going good. You just released a new album.
4 days ago.
4 days ago.
Mm-hmm. It's called Unfinished, and it took me about a year and a half to make because I just COVID mostly. And yeah, it's I don't know, if you count EPs and stuff, it's like my 15th thing since whenever I started this thing in the 90s. But yeah, man, I'm really excited about it. It's I've been releasing singles for over a year and a half from it, so it's, you know, it might be anticlimactic for some folks, but it's about 7 new songs plus 6 songs that I'd already released, or 5 or 6.
Yeah, there's some amazing songs on the album.
Thank you.
I mean, things that I'm afraid of. I really enjoyed it. It's Golden.
Mm-hmm.
I like that song.
Thank you.
And I gave Villain a really good listen this morning. And I mean, Ross, I've told you this before, but you are one of the most clever songwriters. And it's interesting how when I listen to your songs, nothing that's coming is predictable, and then you're just like, why didn't I think of that? That is so good.
Thanks so much. No, I think I do too. You know, gosh, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, so some of that, if you went back in my catalog, you wouldn't see as much of that. And it's mostly that for me, I kind of have maybe a 3-pronged approach to songwriting, and one approach is I'm writing for this other artist, so I'm going to bring a little bit of my flavor, but try to be as universal or speak in their voice, or, you know, kind of try to chameleon myself into what they need to do, and then bring something that I can bring, and that's one way. And then when I do my stuff, I kind of have the other 2 prongs, which is I'm trying to create something super catchy and singable and you know, hooky, but also add something that would be really interesting or clever or provocative or whatever. And then the third way would be just, okay, I have fans who I've had for 25 years, and they know that I'm going to push buttons and poke at stuff. I'm going to be crazy here. I'm going to be, and so Villain would be more like, I don't really care if it's pop. I'm just going to say this thing that I know is probably kind of provocative or kind of weird, and I can lean in all the way on the weirdness and the quirkiness because I've already got a few fans through the other stuff, through the more pop stuff, you know, but this is going to be me just kind of relaxing. I had a record like 6 years ago called Unfettered, and I called it that because people would ask me, what's the difference between writing for someone else and writing for yourself? And I just would tell them, well, when I write for someone else, I'm thinking about demographics and target audiences and that person's voice and that person's, you know, their literal voice and their sort of figurative voice, right? And I'm got a bunch of gatekeepers to think about. When I write for me, I write unfettered, you know, and I was like, oh, that's what I'll call the record. So all that to say, like, you know, that third way that I just mentioned is kind of me fully just saying, oh, I don't have anyone to please here. I have a pile of fans that are going to engage this, and probably not a bunch of other people that are going to engage it. So I'll just speak to the people who already know what they're getting. So I say all that to say, you know, half the record is probably that second way where I'm being kind of pop and kind of, you know, I think the most general way to say it is the chorus is hooky and the verse is crazy, you know?
Yeah.
But then another half of the record is just like the whole thing is crazy or outside of the boundaries of what CCM normally would be or something.
So this is your 15th album.
I mean, roughly. I can't count them.
I've done the approach of one single at a time.
Mm-hmm.
My strategy behind that was always the idea of, you know, people are going to fall in love with a song before they're going to fall in love with an artist.
Right.
And I think for me, still, you know, only being 6 years into doing the pro thing, really trying to find my voice, finding what works, has been it's been slow going, and then I know how hard it is to pick one song. How difficult is it for someone like you? Obviously, you write probably hundreds of songs a year.
Yeah.
To narrow it down to that 14, 15 to 20 songs and go, these are the ones.
Yeah, and I mean, I would tell you that it changes every time, and it's probably something like that. There was that Supreme Court case about pornography, and he said, I know it whenever I see it, that kind of thing. I can't define it. I think that's part of it. Is I just kind of look at the pile of songs and say these feel right. One difference is that, I'm like, you're like a true vocalist. Okay, well, I'm like in the sense that you.
Thank you.
I just mean like you sing and you really care about singing and you sing well, and you would be fine singing someone else's song because you would feel confident you could deliver it in a way that might be unique. I'm that for songwriting. Like, I don't really care as much about singing. I just really, really want to write. And so when I'm writing for me, I might write 4 songs about the same thing just to get it right. So in that 20 or 30 or 50 songs that I'm choosing from, there might be 3 songs about the same thing, or 4.
That's amazing, because a lot of the young songwriters, a lot of the rookie songwriters, like, I still consider myself a rookie songwriter, even though I've been blessed to be in the room with a couple people where we've written a really good one, and I get the credit because I'm the artist, right?
Sure.
But that's one interesting thing, is where you'll come into a write with an idea, and you'll write that song, and it's sort of like, all right, maybe that song wasn't quite the song about that topic. I've rarely ever heard anyone go, hey, let's write another one about that. That just doesn't happen.
Right. And I think part of that,
amazing.
Well, thank you. But part of that probably offends some people, like, hey, he wrote that song and he wrote it again. But it's for me, it's that if something's really stuck in my craw and I want to say it, I want to make sure I get to say it the best way. So I'm going to have almost like an intolerance with, we wrote a song, we chased the idea, it went pretty well, and now it's going to go nowhere. No one's ever going to hear it. Well, I'm going to write it again, or I'm going to rewrite that one. Whatever. I'm just really, ideas are the whole thing for me. Like, if you listen through to this record or the last 2 or 3, you'll hear these ideas. If you listen, that I think are super, like, okay, he wanted to talk about how social media ruins people's lives. He wanted to talk about how underdogs have permeated stories of our culture for thousands of years. He wanted to talk about depression and anxiety and the way it lines up with Psalm 23. Like, it's not just like, a lot of CCM ideas have a lot of super ministering kind of qualities, but they're not an original idea.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not a criticism. That's okay. Like, the culture needs general, basic, surface things, because you're not always ready to, like, stare at your stare at a wall and listen deeply to something. That's not the way we all do all our life. It's just the way I do a lot of what I'm doing. And I write to provoke. I write to cause thought. I write to make people think deeply about who they are and who God is and what the meaning of life is. That's the point for me. I also write sync music, which is just to sell a product, or I write CCM stuff, which is, again, more general. But when I'm writing for me, I'm like, why would we've talked about this, I think, but there's an idea that like, why compete with other people for the same space that they are crushing it in if you don't think you can crush in it? Why not compete in a different space where you think you can crush it, where maybe no one else is crushing it, right? And so for me, when I look at the songwriting landscape, I never think I'm going to write stuff the way Lauren Daigle does. I don't sing like her. I don't have the audience that she has. I don't have the financial backing she has. I don't have the fan base. I'm not a female. None of that. So I'm going to write something, and if I am in my lane, and we've had a lot of conversations about lanes, right? And if I'm in my lane, I should theoretically succeed,
right?
If I do my best. And so for me, it's all about that I am writing, hey, this is the thing I do, and if I really do this at my best, I'm as good as maybe anybody in this particular very narrow lane. Yeah. It's not like I'm saying the best in something broad, but in this one way, I feel pretty confident. And so I've just, over 25 years, way too slowly figured out what that lane is. Yeah. And I still am.
I mean, I've gleaned a lot from the times we've written together and just talked. And, you know, by the way, for those who don't know, like there's been a handful of times over the last couple of years where I've just been like, I don't know what to do about this. Let me call Ross. And Ross has been amazing to spend the time on the phone with me and go, not a big deal. This is what I would do.
Right.
Do this. And, you know, it's always been great and helpful and
well,
huge.
the 35-year-old me is a lot like you.
Right.
And or 40-year-old me or whatever. And so I see a lot of that. And I don't know. I thank you. And I think mostly I just try to pull back and get a 30,000-foot view as often as I can on stuff.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do whenever you're emotional.
So as far as like the lane thing, that's really kind of, well, that's why this podcast is a thing now, because often I go into songwrites with like, hey, I really want to talk about this because I don't, and that's the thing. I'm learning that you can't be a songwriter. Songwriters almost have to speak on something, and you can share certain things, but you're not going to learn anything from asking those questions in a song. And I want to learn because, you know, I want to know. I mean, I genuinely, if I'm going to write a song about doubt and we all go through it, where am I going to get my answers? Maybe in the hate comments that come, maybe. Or the people who question my salvation because, you know, maybe I'm going through some stuff that's making you go, man, is God even real? Yeah. I can't write that song because no one's going to listen to that. They're not going to play that at a church. It's not going to sell. It's not going to end up on a playlist. How do I talk about that? So it's like, well, what's my lane? I feel like I am a person who really, really is very good at interacting with people. And for the most part, except in like text form. I can't write like a blog. I would offend the world because they're just not understanding. Maybe, if you get to know me, you know, like I might say something in a weird voice just to be silly, but you can't read that. You can't read. And a lot of times the way I'll write something on paper isn't quite the way it's taken. But if I said it, man, everyone would be like, yeah, right on. You know, or they go, oh, you're so stupid. Why are you're so goofy? And so it's definitely finding my lane in this industry where it's, you know, everyone's doing the touring and the albums and the Kickstarters and they're crushing it. Like you said, it's like, well, is there space for me there? Kinda. And I've done well for a nobody who hasn't paid the world to get myself out there. But it's like, I think for the young new artist, that is huge advice to go, hey, find your thing. And it's not going to be following your influences because they're doing it already. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I often talk about this music thing almost like a house that we're a bunch of rats trying to get in a house. And when one chews a hole and gets in, it gets closed up. You're not getting in that hole. There's now, like, it's been patched up. There's, you know, metal there. You can't chew through it. You got to find another hole. And that's sort of the analogy that I have seen.
I mean, I think I'd need to hear more because I don't know. Look, at the end of the day,
ultimately, no two success stories are identical.
Right.
Nobody did it the exact same way.
Right.
The exact same people. It just.
Yeah, I guess I just don't. Look, on my insecure days, I probably think those houses are closed up. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to ruin that metaphor by trying to say it a better way. But at the end of the day, if we do quality work that impresses people, you can get in any house that you want to.
What I mean is you got to chew your own hole. You can't.
Sure.
You can't. You're not going to go. You're not going to go through an already chewed through hole. It's been closed.
Right. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I think there are people who get kind of entouraged into that kind of stuff. For sure.
I've definitely seen
there
that.
There are definitely rats with a big entourage, and then there's, you know, somebody's protege is getting something, and we've all got that. I mean, every story in Outliers has something like that. Like nobody gets there completely on their own. There's always something tying you to it, even stuff you don't know.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, I've had those kinds of like moments of it's a closed space for me. I can't get in. And on my worst days, you know, laying awake at night, I think, yeah, I'm nearly 50 years old. I'm never going to get into this thing. But I also have songwriter friends who would love to share their songs at a church or online and have people engage it. And I have zero problem doing that. I mean,
Right.
I've done, occasionally I say this stuff out loud, not to brag, but to remind myself to stop complaining. I've done 4 Kickstarters, which you're not supposed to do that many. You're supposed to do 1 or 2. It's supposed to kickstart a business, not a record. I've done 4 of them. They've all overfunded. They've all quickly funded. And the last one I made $26,000 and change. I mean, that's crazy. And that's because I have worked over slowly, sometimes in spite of myself. I've worked, in spite of my own whatevers. I've gotten there and built this fan base slowly. And it's not a huge fan base, but it's loyal. And like we were saying before the podcast started, they're not buying my music. At this point, they're buying me.
Right.
And I don't mean that as like I'm for sale. Like what I'm saying is they're buying the story that I am telling. And I know that's true because every time I do some kind of crowdfunding, they don't know the songs yet. They might know 1 or 2 that I have released, but mostly they're going to hear snippets and clips and vision casting, and they're going to hear what I'm doing and why I want to do it. But they're not hearing whole songs, so they're actually purchasing something that is not music yet.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And if we, and that's kind of we've had this discussion, you and I, about how CCM isn't really artist loyal. I mean, there's a few people at the very top, like it's a 90-10 kind of a principle. There's a very few people at the top who have garnered a loyal fan base, but they're mostly just like the most famous. And then there's some outliers kind of on the side who have kind of indie cred. So your Need to Breathe, your Andrew Peterson, that kind of stuff. But mostly, what you have is people who. You have fans who, if they were shown a blind taste test of 5 male vocalists, they wouldn't be able to know which one is which.
Yeah.
Mostly. And that model works just fine in the general market. I mean, you have so many people who are crushing it and are never on the radio and have zero, I don't know, they don't have public mass consumption opportunities, and yet they've built fan bases and they're killing it, Yeah. But in CCM, for some reason, that's just not a thing we know how to do. And so I have, pseudo-adopted that principle that I would like to make, I'd love my songs to be on some big radio station, but I doubt it. I'd love to write for other people who go on the radio station, and occasionally that happens. But as an artist, I'm mostly going to dive into that fan base that I have and, invite them into my journey and my story, and then do little things here and there, to promote my songs on Spotify to get more fans or whatever. And that's a two-winged bird, right? You have to keep looking for more fans and for more exposure. But at my point in my career, it's foolish for me to put the lion's share of my energy and money into getting new fans through streaming or something.
Right.
Because as you and I both know, there's no money there. Versus I can make half my month's bills on a weekend of doing shows to the fans who already like me, and or the fans that will show up, the future fans who will show up at a church and watch me do my thing.
You're ultimately driving it is that you've learned to embrace where you're at rather than lament that you're not where maybe, at one time you had dreamt of going.
Well, I certainly do both
Yeah.
still,
Well,
because I'm an insecure mess. But
well,
yes.
I mean, I think if we're all being honest, even the top of the heap is still that. And
right.
On
my best days, I'm doing what you just said.
And I've had to remind myself as well, in the same vein, like one man's floor is another man's ceiling.
Sure.
And I remember a time, before I moved to Nashville, before I ever did that, I mean, we'd be at a street fair and there'd be people playing on a stage, and I'd be like, oh, that'd be cool to do that.
Right.
And then here I am now. I mean, I have some friends who are they're signed artists. They're not, they're on some radio, but not a lot, who are like, how did you get on that festival? How did you get that? And I'm just like, I don't know.
Right.
I just asked, and they said, yes.
Right. Right.
You know, so it's,
And they don't know that getting a festival, then the next day your life's back to normal, and it didn't necessarily make your life any better. Sometimes it's amazing, and other times it's just a gig.
I mean, most of the time people...
They see, we all see things through this lens of, I saw this guy doing this thing, and it must have been amazing, and it must have made his life better. And you're like, sometimes.
And what they don't know is that, yes, just like you said, you go back home, that same festival posts, who do you want here next year? No one mentions your name because no one knows who you were.
Right.
Because you're not on the radio.
Right.
You don't have that hit song.
Right.
And it's okay, though, because for me, what I've learned to do is love the process. Number one, love the process. Going out there with the guys, playing the show, meeting people. The fact that, to me, I am nobody. I am not worth anyone's time. And now that might be, someone hearing me say that might be like, oh, that's not true. But it's like, well, okay, but that's the battle.
Sure.
It's like, I'm not really worth their time. Why are they making much of me right now? Just because they've heard a song I've recorded and they thought it was really good?
Or just because you were platformed in a way that impresses them.
But I've learned to go, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And my goal every time we play a show is never, hey, selling merch helps. It helps a lot. People following you on social media, it all helps. But my goal every time is at least one person come up to me and go, and it happens almost every time. They come up to me and go, hey man, thank you for talking about that song. I talk about why my most popular and most impactful song is Keep Fighting. Mm-hmm. And that seems to reach people in a way that just, I think for me, it was always like, hey, I just want to have a song that makes people go, oh, that's everything I needed to hear today. Right. And that's the one. So that's my goal when I go out there and do that. And as long as I do that, it kind of makes everything else okay.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, that was worth the 10, 13-hour drive. That was worth the hundreds of dollars I paid the band. That was worth, and as hard as this is a hard thing to say, but that was worth missing my kid's softball game.
Sure.
Because that person was like, wow, man, I've really been struggling with suicide, and I'm going to listen to that song a lot, man, because, I really don't want to give up. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's why we were here.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that stuff.
No. This podcast is brought to you in part by Tone Junkie TV, your best source for Kemper, Helix, and impulse response profiles. Check them out on YouTube, all social media at Tone Junkie TV. Also check them on the web store at tonejunkiestore.com. Use promo code Golly to get 50% off site-wide. That's right, 50% off site-wide, tonejunkiestore.com.
I get way too many emails saying nice things about a song, and the difficulty is to always say, okay, today, let's say today is a day when I'm frustrated about bills or I don't feel like I'm succeeding, is to always keep those things sort of in a side view, of my peripheral, and say, I am doing something that for whatever reason God has allowed it to reach people, and even if I feel, misunderstood today or underappreciated or, financially stressed or something, this has an impact, and they don't have any clue about any of that other stuff. They just heard the song and felt encouraged or felt challenged or felt, some kind of connection because I said something or you said something that they didn't think they would hear and that made them feel less alone. And that, that doesn't pay the bills, and so you have to be pragmatic about it at some level, but you have to balance all that pragmatism and say, this matters, like in an eternal way. This really matters, and I have to stop seeing everything as like a number or I can't be so opportunistic that I only take the gig that feels like it's going to make me rich or cool. And miss out on moments. Because I'm sure you've had this, but I've had so many moments where I am out on the road and the gig is going okay, and then something happens totally unrelated to how well my concert went or something, and I'm like, oh, this is why I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen every time. A lot of times you're there because of the concert. But I'm saying there are moments where you think, oh, this is why I'm here. And had I said no to this, or had I just evaluated this time on how well the technical stuff went or something, I would have missed this.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
One thing to speak on that, you talked about like doing the shows you think are going to kind of make you rich. When I've done tours, it's interesting how me and the band, they'll look at the schedule, be on the road, and a lot of times I have these full production shows. I bring lights and, the haze and all that, all the magic, and then we have like, we'll play like, this small church wants us to come in, just do an acoustic thing. It's probably 10, 15 people there. It's, nothing big, no big deal, and not that we besmirch that or like take it for granted, but we just kind of like, all right, this is low stakes. It's like, it's going to be easy. Probably not going to make a whole lot on it, whatever. And then we'll go play it. And God, the offering will be through the roof. And the merch, it's like, we sold how much merch? And, then they're like, hey, let's take you guys to Buffalo Wild Wings. It ends up being the most blessed thing. Because even in those times where it's like, hey, this may not be a great one, but you know what? I find to always making sure that I'm like, look, the approach is going to be the same. I'm still going to do this the same way, with the same understanding that there might be one person or 1,000, doesn't matter. The approach can be the same. And the reality from a business standpoint, you never know who's there. If two people are there, one of them could be, richer than Mark Cuban, who's like, hey, you impacted me. Here's $50,000. Love what you're doing.
Right.
No, and God can operate like that.
And we've had this discussion too.
Yeah.
That's why I've stopped selling 90% of my merch, and I know we disagree on this, but is pay what you want, because I always get more than I would get.
We don't disagree on it. I've run with it.
Oh, okay.
Because I asked you once, because I think you mentioned on a Facebook Live how you sold out of CDs, and I'm like, dude, I hardly sell CDs. What's going on? And you told me the trick. Not that it's a trick, but
yeah, don't call it a trick.
It's not a trick. I'm sorry, but like
edit that out.
You've told me the magic formula that, in my opinion, it's just a great way to do it, because pay what you want. In some cases, that's an amazing thing, because that invites people to put a value on that CD. And for some people, that value is way more than what you would have been asking
and some
for.
folks just really want it and have no money, and I'm great that they got it. Right? So what happens for me, invariably when I do that, is somebody takes one for $1 or nothing, and I tell them from the stage, you can have these if you want them. Because for my deal, again, I've been doing this for so long, I've got a closet full of extra merch,
Yep.
And all of it's already been paid for. So that money's gone. I'm not even thinking about it. So everything I'm making at the show, unless it's brand new stuff, is profit.
Right.
So I just say, hey, if this mattered to you and you would like it, and again, people aren't using CD players anymore, so hardly anyone's just going to take it because they really, really,
right.
So, but always I get somebody who takes it for free, a lot of folks who take it for about the value that I would charge, and several who give me way more.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being even or more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it all ends up going, which I'm great with. And hardly anybody just takes it. And I never, ever, ever comment on them taking it in some weird way. Yeah. I just say, please take it. And when people walk up to me and give me, $20 and take one, I'm like, hey, these two over here are from 10 years ago, and they're a jewel case and nobody wants this.
Right.
Please take these two, because I want you to get, if you're actually playing this on CD player, I want you to pop these 3 in, and over the course of this week, I want you to soak in all these thoughts I've had that represent the journey I've been on for 20 years, right? And that to me is like foolish not to, because then here's where, here's the part that may seem, like a trick, is that you look nicer than you are for saying you can have this. You know what I mean? Like, and for me, to be honest, I don't, it's not false. I really do want them to take it. And I really do want to pay the bills, but I just don't it's just never been a concern for me, you know.
Yeah.
And so if I'm bringing like shirts and stuff, then I'll put a price on that stuff. But even then, I will work really hard to make sure that people know if you're coming up to the table and wanting something and you can't afford it, you know, I don't want to like wrong the next customer by giving you like a fake deal or something or like an inconsistent deal. But I just don't want people to walk away wanting something and not having it,
Right.
Because you will get that fan.
Oh, yeah.
Period. You'll get that fan.
Yeah.
And if it's a kid, you know, or just anyone with community, they'll go tell other people that you gave them that, or that you gifted that, or that you give them a discount or whatever. And that's just like I really, really, really believe in the idea that it's not karma. It's just like I believe that you know, if I'm giving and generous and gracious with people, the Lord's going to be that way with me. I just don't have any doubts about that.
Yeah, and I know you. I know your heart is ministry first, and I think that the one thing that a lot of fans and even some rookie artists have trouble understanding is that, yes, there is a dollars and cents business side of this. And that's hard for some who really just want it to be 1,000% ministry all the time. And it's just, unfortunately, it's tough to balance where's the line.
I just don't, I think for me, and again, I'm in a way different place than you are in sort of the whole journey of it, but
yeah,
so much of my merch is paid for. And
Yeah.
so I don't have those worries as much. And I just rarely take some kind of a gig where the merch matters all that much. Most of my gigs, I make sure, you know, I don't know how much you travel versus I travel, but I'm only out like maybe 5 days a month. And I just so often know this person is gracious with me. This person's this church, this ministry is generous. I'm not going to have any problems. Because I do a really hippie deal, man. I don't even have contracts. I don't do any of that. Like if people want them, then I have all that. But I literally, like, again, part of it, like I said, some of it doesn't scale for you because I'm at this so long that the person calling me has brought me in 7 times.
Yeah.
Right. It's just different.
I've had that. I mean, I've had relationship with churches that, you know, once a year I'm there,
right.
you know.
And part of this too, man, is
you
that
know
I'm just reacting to 20 years probably of cynicism about this. And I'm saying, nope, no more. If I'm going to die on this hill, I'm going to die optimistic. I'm going to die believing the best about people, because I just don't have room, and my heart doesn't have any more room to be like cynical about people. It just doesn't work for me anymore. It just makes me sad, and I don't want to do this. If I'm going to walk around cynical and think, you know, these people are going to screw me over, that's poison for me. And so I can't do it.
And it's interesting in this industry, you'll hear a lot of those horror stories. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, as far as now, I've never had a church, you know, not honor what they said they would. And, you know, I've had a couple of things fall through beforehand, thankfully. You know, because again, not everything is adding up, you know. But the way I've always kind of approached it is my goal with financially when I go out on the road is like, you know, do I have enough to pay the band? Yes. Mm-hmm. Cool. Is there, you know, is accommodations covered? All the, the bottom line is if I was to not sell a single CD, is this trip and the band all covered? If it is, great. If I sell merch, that's my paycheck for the trip. In a lot of cases, a lot of tours, I've written everyone checks or Venmo'd everyone in the band. And what I was left with was enough to maybe put gas in my car.
Right. And so, and again, your situation is totally different. I'm going out solo all the time. Yeah. Just me. So whatever money comes in, it's mine. It's time for, and you've got a whole other thing.
Time for guitar lessons, I think.
I mean, no, that is a factor though, because you have to have somebody else out there with you, and I just don't. And for years I have taken bands before, and I've done gigs. I've done lots of band gigs, lots of like me and one other guy or whatever. And I take my sons a lot because they can play, but I do so many things, just me, and part of that's just was a response to some of the stuff that you're saying. Like I spent maybe 10 years feeling like I'm okay on guitar, and I'm really bad on the piano, so I'm gonna have someone out with me everywhere that I go, and a variety of of reasons, everything from, band members moving on and getting a better gig, which I'm happy for, or just they get a real job or whatever. I just finally was like, wait, I don't like that every single call I have to call somebody else.
Right.
Like, I just want to say, yes, I can do that. I'm going to ask my wife, and then I'm going to go. Yeah. And for me, that was kind of part of me honing my craft. Not to say that that's what you should do, because you've had a whole other pile of things that you've done to hone your craft with having the sound and lights and all those things. I don't do that stuff as well, and I don't even – my merch game is pretty behind. But yours is great.
I will say this, though, and thank you for that. And, it was an evolution. Because, like with the merch game, it was like I kind of had the tactic of like, well, cool, I'll make everything look very DIY. So maybe people would be like, oh, poor guy.
Yeah, sure.
And then I played a festival and set up my merch, which I used to be super proud of. And I'm literally right next to Matthew West's and Jordan Feliz's. And I'm just like, it literally looked like mansion, right. Shack in the woods.
And again, this is back to that problem of in that moment, you're having to kind of compete in their lane.
Yeah.
And you're just not gonna.
So I literally went home from that festival and just redid everything. I mean, I got the tablecloths with my logo on it, and a big banner, and the dummies for the T-shirts to be able to go, okay, maybe I'm not 6 tables like them, but I'm going to have 2 nice tables. It's going to have lights. It's going to be lit up. It's going to look the part. And that has worked very well for me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, the merch and all that stuff, it's great. And, you talked about honing the craft, where, to be honest, a lot of that was born out of insecurity. Which is, it's interesting because people always say, don't be insecure. And I'm like, well, I'm grateful for the insecurity because I wouldn't be good at anything that I'm good at. Sure. I'd gotten booked for a youth event, and it was like, cool, great. I don't ever do youth events. This will be fun. And then the guy called me back like an hour later, and he goes, oh, by the way, you have like lights and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I got lights. Don't worry, I'll have it.
Yeah.
And because he's like, he goes, if you don't have lights, the kids are gonna not like the show. And I'm like, oh, they're not gonna like me. I need lights. And I mean, literally went from I don't know anything about lighting to up in the spare room in my house, had this whole rig set up. My wife yelling at me about fogging the house out with the haze machines, and had to learn this. But so I used to always go in for probably about 2 years. It was always like, I need this, need to have this, has to be huge. I need a bass player. I need guitar, drums, has to be all this stuff. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a blessing, but COVID happened. Mm-hmm. And a lot of guys didn't want to tour. A lot of churches were like, look, we can't give you any guarantees. We'd love to have you though. So I went out with one guitar player essentially on a tour, and it was enough. And for the first time ever, I'm like, wait a minute, just me singing and a guitar is enough. Wow. Okay. And that's still a challenge to move forward. Because I always wondered, man, how do guys like you go out there and just play acoustic guitar? And then I really started to take, like you said earlier, like a 3,000 foot back view of hey, what's everyone doing? And I look at guys like a Dave Pettigrew, that guy can go with a band, he can go alone, he can play with tracks, he can do whatever, and people just love it.
Right.
Because it's enough.
Right.
And I see a guy like you go out with your acoustic guitar, and people love it. Pack the house, people love it, support it, they want you back. Whereas I would literally be taking the stage, like, I hope the haze machines look right because they're not going to want us back. When all they want is an experience. They just want to worship. They just want to sing. They just want that. And that for me has been sort of an evolution to where I'm getting there and understanding what it is that people are really wanting.
And look, the other thing that you do, that's not a bad idea. It's just that I feel, like I said earlier, I don't know how to compete with people who, one, have 10 to 20 to 100 times the financial resources and management admin resources that I'm going to have. Okay? So I don't know how to do what they do with my resources being a fraction of theirs in those ways. And on top of that, and this is maybe where we're a little bit different, what I'm doing songwriting-wise is not even what they do. So, And I don't say that to be like, I'm better, I'm different. It's literally, I don't know how to do what they do. Like I have joked before that, like I'm doing a writer's round this weekend at that Live Fest that you're going to be at. And, you know, they want me to do cuts. And I'm like, I'll do a couple of my cuts and I'll do a couple of my songs because the cuts won't even, I don't even know how to, I can't do it the way that Cade
Right.
Thompson does it. It won't sound cool. I wrote it for him and I'll do it, but it's going to feel like, oh, that's, if you know me at all, you'll be like, oh, that's kind of a weird choice for him, you know? And I just don't do what they do. So I lean the other direction completely and say, you know, it's kind of an old, production kind of a tip that I used to have when I was doing more production. If you look like you swung for the fences and don't make it, it's terrible. If you look like you're going for a single and you nail it, you look awesome. Okay,
Right.
so and that's probably a bad metaphor because I know a home run is better than a single in baseball. Okay, but it's also a whole lot more rare, and it's also a big place where people fail. And for me, if I am attempting to look like Mercy Me, it is going to be hilarious and
Right.
bad and embarrassing. But if I do something that literally they cannot do, and just on a smaller scale, I mean, it's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Like people like it, and moreover, most of the venues that I play, a larger, more mainstream artist, the crowd wouldn't even necessarily like them. They might think they're supposed to like them because they know that song and then that person's famous,
Right,
but they're not
right.
going to be ministered to in the same way. There's a concept that I've never shared with you that I think is really powerful, and it's this idea of active listening versus passive listening. And I think that the vast majority of CCM is written to be engaged passively. You're going to be in a car, you're going to be at a place, somewhere where you engage, and it's going to come at you. And it's not meant to be, you know, you've heard someone send you a text or an email saying, Tom, I listened to your song and I had to pull over the car and cry a little, whatever. That's active listening.
Right.
And when I go to a church and play my song, and this is probably controversial, my song will go over better 9 times out of 10
Right.
than a mainstream CCM song in that context, because that song is not written to be, hey, stare at Ross's face while he sings this song that's on the CCM radio and listen to his story. It won't hold up.
Right.
It doesn't have that power. It has a different kind of power that's equally good, in some ways more powerful because it reaches more people. But when I do my songs, my deep, provocative, quirky, hard to understand sometimes songs at a church, here's what no one ever says to me. I like that, but I can see why it's not playing on the radio.
Right.
No one ever says that to me.
No one ever says that, no.
They don't ever say that to me. They wonder why it's not, because they don't have a clue what those parameters are, right? Because I stood in front of them, I told them a story, they see my life, they maybe checked me out before I got there and saw my family on Facebook or whatever, and I tell them my story and I sing my complicated song that is going to demand more of them mentally and emotionally than maybe that other song is. Mm-hmm. And again, not to make it better, it's just a different kind of thing. And they're not, and they're going to walk away really, really interacting with me.
Right.
And that's a big deal. And that's my lane. And so in that lane, and again, this is not to disparage anything that you've had to do, I don't need lights. I don't need haze. I don't need a slick band. I don't need tracks. In that lane, I need none of that. In that lane, what I need is prowess or like excellence in playing chords, hitting the notes, telling the stories.
Yeah.
That's what I need. And I've 25 years of doing that. I'm pretty good at it now, right? So so I'm not going to miss doing that. And they go to that table. It's the only table in the church. And even if it's not the only table in the church, it is DIY. And they expect it because I kind of goofed off on stage and told a funny story and stuttered a little bit and stammered. I was me. I was completely me.
Yep.
It wasn't unprofessional. I didn't just like say dumb stuff or whatever. I didn't and make awkward jokes. It's professional. It's just not the same. And ironically, and I know I'm ranting here, but ironically, the lost people, I'm using air quotes, for those who can't see this, the general market doesn't care about that.
Right.
They love it when Justin Bieber and whoever else kind of goofs off. They love that. We're the only people in the whole world who think putting on a brave face and being perfect is what people want. Nobody really wants that.
So I love that you just said that because, man, what I've been wanting to ask you this entire time, waiting for the opportunity, and you just nailed it. Don't you go into a lot of rights as an artist or even just as a songwriter? Do you ever feel hindered by that filter, by the fact that, oh, wait a minute, like I can't sing about that thing because it wouldn't fit the filter? Like I can't sing about, I mean, notice there's no Christian road rage songs, but I think we all get angry,
Sure.
and I personally struggle sometimes as a person, and we've talked about this, where I'm like, I feel this way, but there's no song about it. And what I run into is, for argument's sake, on Facebook, I was agitated by a delivery that was supposed to come to me.
Right.
That literally the guy, I sent the guy a map on how to get there, and he still couldn't figure it out. It was frustrating. And I'm just like, if you can't read a map, maybe you shouldn't be a delivery driver. And like, I got a few people who are like, what's with the negativity, bro?
Right.
And throwing scripture, and it's like, because that's how I really felt.
Right.
And I'm sorry that you have this high expectation of me that I'm always like, oh, gee, it's okay that our time-sensitive delivery just didn't show up, and now we can't finish what we were working on. Like, I mean, so it's a challenge. So do you ever find that a real challenge to not be able to talk about certain things in songs or express certain feelings?
I mean, maybe, but I think probably for me, I just don't ever want to write. I can't think of a time when I wanted to write something that was that solutionless. Like I just don't. Like you. Okay, so whenever you do that, what's your goal? What's your goal in saying the delivery driver sucked?
Okay, no one's ever asked me that. That's good.
Right.
I think my goal with that is just to have someone go, man, I hate that too.
Sure.
And
I think for me, I don't do that stuff. I don't air that laundry in the world.
Yeah,
I do that in my home or in my friends.
It's certainly not a terrific practice, but
that's my main, I don't do social media like that.
Right.
And I just don't, look, one of my favorite things to go back to is everything is permissible, not everything is beneficial.
Right.
And I just think if people followed that social media wise, there'd be a lot less of that. I've got so many friends, and I've done this before too, but so many friends who do that and then get frustrated with the response. And I'm like, well, one way to not be frustrated with response is not to post that. That's just me. Like so I will ask myself when I'm posting something kind of personal, what do I want? What am I looking for here? Look, one of the craziest things Jesus does throughout the scripture is he'll see somebody who is like crippled, obviously, or blind, and he'll say, what do you want? And it's like, the guy's blind. What do you think he wants? But he wants me to say what I want. And I think so often in these kind of situations, if I was your angel on your shoulder, I'd say, okay, Tom, before you post that, what do you want? And what's going to really tick you off after this? Because I think that's like a trap. You're a Christian artist, right? Who people are going to necessarily assume incorrect things about and unfair things about. But if you do that, they will line you up against the Mercy Me or whatever and think, why isn't he being positive and encouraging like Caleb promised me that he was going to be?
And that's sort of my thing is like, I can't say like you mentioned a Mercy Me, like I can't say I know those guys. Right. Like I know who they are. I know, we live in the same kind of area, I've bumped into them a bunch of times, things like that. But I'm willing to bet you that, again, not on social media, just like everybody else, they have their moments of ranting. And I think for me, maybe what I sometimes feel like, I don't know, to quote Marvel's Loki, I sometimes feel burdened with glorious purpose. Right. To go, you know what? I'm just like everybody else. I get mad. Right. I get angry. I get upset. And later go, maybe that wasn't that big a deal.
Sure.
And I'm trying to be that so people go, man, he's just like me. He gets it.
Right. But I
because
don't.
that's cathartic for a lot.
Sure.
It's cathartic for me.
Right, and you also get really you have an extra bit of frustration when it doesn't go like you wanted.
Well, that's true.
Is what I'm getting at. And
Yeah.
it's always going to not go like you wanted on social media. It just is.
Right. Well, and especially in today's culture where what can happen, and I feel like you and I are not this person, but because like you and I, we've disagreed on social media, and then it's like, no, we're fine. Just disagreed on that. You're still, you're awesome. Right. You're still my friend.
Right.
Like, no big deal. And like, I have a business partner and a podcast co-host on another podcast I'm on. We fundamentally disagree about almost everything. Where we're almost like yelling at each other.
Right.
I mean, it's like, he'll be like, Tom, how could you think that? And I'll be like, how could you think it? It's like, all right, anyway. So let's go back to editing that. Like, it's because the stakes do not need to be agree or die.
Right.
But social media has become, oh, that's what you think? You're dead to me.
Right.
What?
But you know that. See, here's the thing. I know that, so I don't. And this is not, I'm not better than you, man. I'm just telling you this is not how I want to spend my energy. I don't want to deal with people who are telling me, who don't know me, who don't know anything about why I posted this, who don't get the tone or whatever. I don't want to. I don't have time to do that. So if I'm posting things that are going to get responses, I'm saying, does this matter to the world, and how can I speak into the world? So my social media is basically 3 or 4 things. It's here's my family doing something fun. It's here's my artist career, something interesting, and it's here's something provocative that is kind of global or kind of super consequential. I'm just you will not you would a private detective will not find a single passive aggressive thing or a single customer service complaint on my social media. Just none of it. And that doesn't make me better than you. I'm simply saying the answer to me is just don't post that.
I'm just the type of person where like there's, and granted they're not Christians, but like there's people out in the world that I follow who will go, hey, this is what I think of that. Sure. And it's like, and sure, people hate on it and whatever. Obviously they don't respond, but they're just like, I'm comfortable with it. I'm okay with that. It is what it is.
Right.
And
but most of them are not in the arena you're in.
Right. But that's the thing. I kind of sometimes wonder like which is the right way?
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's the conundrum.
What do you think your responsibility is as Tom Golly, logo Christian artist Tom Golly? What's your responsibility?
So I believe what my calling as an artist and as a I guess content creator is to motivate, inspire people to to move forward, follow their calling.
Okay.
And that they can just to find the freedom in Christ.
Yes, love that.
But what I don't believe I'm called to do is take them beyond that. Like I always felt like my goal is to point you to where you can. I'll take you to the door.
Yeah,
it's your job to walk in and you do that because man, I ain't that good at that either.
Right.
I just know where I found freedom. I know where my life has been changed.
Right.
Just a couple days ago, again, I've been sort of in a weird season, and I was talking about that first time that I just knew that, Jesus just came into my life, and it just, the emotions behind it were like, whoa, because I knew for that moment I was free. I was like, I want to take people there because your life can change in that freedom, walk in that freedom.
Yeah.
Now, so when I hear people often will talk about how, and you've shared this with me, and you're not wrong, but I struggle with it, is the idea that I'm supposed to be above reproach or I'm supposed to be like a pastor, and I just don't feel like that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't know that I would verbalize it like that, but I know
but I've had people say that to me.
Sure, but the fact is, you're asking. Here's where I think the rub is. You're asking to be noticed and followed and applauded and invested in by Christians.
Right.
You're taking a platform that is above them both literally and sort of in this kind of perceived way. There's just no question that people see somebody on the radio or on a stage as a celebrity. And you're doing it with Jesus songs. There's just no getting around the scriptural call to that. Like, you have asked to kind of teach them, to kind of lead them. You may not feel like that's true, but it just is.
Sure.
They see it that way, and you can't extrapolate it. And so, I mean, you don't have to like it, but there is a responsibility that you have. And
sure. I mean, I definitely,
doesn't mean you have to be like perfect, but I mean, I think in 2021, who's actually looking for that anymore? Like, we have social media pastors being super honest about all kinds of things. I don't think anybody realistically, and again, this is part of why I stay away from, as an artist, I stay away from the CCM world, because I just don't fit. Like, I know how to write there, kind of, but as an artist, I've made it super clear, this is who I am. And so I don't get a lot of that.
Right.
And so when I started talking about politics or race in the last few years, I immediately identified myself as someone who wasn't going to probably line up with the very kind of cliche, conservative Christian CCM world. And I made that clear. But here's how I did it. I shoved so much Bible in what I said that if you want to come at me with it, you better bring some Bible.
Right.
You're not going to, I'm going to win that, not because I'm godly or because I do the work. Like, and so my thing is, I am responsible. And so if somebody thinks that any posts about race or any posts that are not pro-Trump are somehow ungodly, okay, I'm going to help you. I'm going to show you why I think that with the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. And now the impetus is on you to show me why I'm wrong, right?
Sure.
And so I'm able to like lift up. So if I was going to lead some weaker brother astray in that moment by making them vote for a Democrat or something, which I would never tell them to do, but if I was going to lead them astray, I'm going to do so by using the literal Word of God.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
And that's how I answer that responsibility thing. And again, for me, I stay away from, for me, super personal, I'm mad about this or I'm whatever, just because I always, like when and this is new in the last couple of years, when I start to get in that little box and type, what do you want to tell people or whatever, however Facebook says that or however Twitter says it. When I start to type, I ask myself, what am I hoping to accomplish? And if this goes poorly, how much is it going to ruin my day? And in what ways? And if those two answers feel weird to me, I just don't post.
Right.
And the world has lost nothing. They don't need me. They don't need me talking.
That's factual, and it's interesting. There's a friend of mine who's doing the artist thing for a while, and worship leader at a big church, all that. He just decided to just like get rid of social media. Just with no warning, nothing. And about 2-3 months went by, and I'm like, actually, he didn't delete it. It's just there. He just doesn't post anymore.
Sure.
So I called him, and I was like, hey man, what's up? You okay? I haven't posted in a while. He goes, man. He goes, he goes, in 6 months, you're only the second person to reach out to me. He's like, I found that interesting. Right. And now, to be fair, to defend all the masses that he's like, upset with, we've created a culture where that's how we connect with people, and you removed yourself from it.
Sure, and there's so much noise that they don't even notice it.
Right.
There's that problem.
So, I look at it like if we're all on a big conference call and one person hangs up, there's so much going on. Of course no one noticed.
Right.
And part of that too is, my question for him was, what value was your social media bringing to people that they missed it? Right. And if they didn't miss it, maybe there was something wrong with what you're doing.
And there's another question of what was it giving to you and taking from you that that's now different because you're not there. Because there are very successful business people that don't do social media except the occasional, bot kind of promo thing. I mean, Graham Cochran, he's like an incredibly good, coach and does great in business coaching and stuff. He doesn't have social media. He hasn't been on it for like a year and a half. Right. And he's crushing it, and man, I mean, I've said this 1,000 times. If I ever quit doing this, what I'm doing, I'm off social media. Mark my words. I just don't like it, and I need it for work. But I don't love, and I'm also just a really private person. This part of this is that in this conversation, you've tricked me with this empty room to make me think we're all by ourselves. But in real life, I don't want to tell anybody what's going on with me. I do that with my songwriting. You can hear you can hear my heart. That's why I'm so vulnerable with my songwriting. I put it all there.
Right.
But I don't want to talk about my personal problems on my social media at all.
Right. Yeah, which, I mean, I keep stuff pretty close to the vest as well. I'm very, very private person, especially like people notice. You might notice, sure, occasionally, I post something funny with what I do with my daughters or a picture occasionally.
Right.
That part of that's just to be like, yeah, I do have kids, and yes, I do have a wife. See, look.
Right.
But ultimately, it's like, because it's hard. First off, it's hard enough to be vulnerable in a song or go up on a stage and tell a story of why you wrote this song, and you're sort of opening up certain windows of your life. But it's not easy. And, I think social media is, a place where, and I'm probably guilty of this, I admitted this earlier, where sometimes you just want someone to go, man, I know, me too.
Right.
And you're just like, oh, good. Because a lot of times for me, like, and anyone who knows me, you can ask the guys in my band or anything. I almost start a lot of questions with, am I crazy that I feel this way? Is something wrong with me that made me feel that way? And sometimes when it's like, yeah, man, no, I get it. It's like, oh, good. I don't need to go to the loony bin.
I don't fault you for that at all. But I mean, dude, someone will say yes on social media. Someone will say yes, and then your day's ruined. Or at least you're frustrated, or you're kind of wondering why you want to argue with them. Now you got an hour of your life is gone. Right? Like I'm not coaching you out of social media. I'm saying I don't do that stuff because some person, either just with authenticity or because they got a bone to pick, is going to show up and say, yes, you are crazy. I mean, I've done that. You've done that.
Yeah.
We've responded to someone's post by saying, that doesn't apply to me at all. Well, then just why are you here?
Right.
Because it's social media, because there's zero cost. So I just don't invite that stuff.
One of my favorite things to do on social media, and for better or for worse, is I've enjoyed, just because, I mean, look, on a Enneagram, I'm an 8. I like justice. When someone I care about even a little bit is under attack, I'm on the front lines with them, And sometimes where they're like, whoa, bro, relax. That's my cousin. It's like, yeah, but he called you that, and that's not cool.
Right, but there's no context. Yeah. Like, that's my thing, that stuff just scares me.
But I mean, I think there was even a post you had done probably about a year ago where someone attacked you kind of harshly. And I know that I was one of a few people who were like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't know this guy.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. And those posts are usually things where I'm saying part of this is that, I did that Kickstarter for this most recent record over a year and a half ago. It was in February of 2020, just before the pandemic. The night that I closed the campaign, I had $26,000 in change. I laid awake at night and thought, wait a second, I just raised $26,000 just so I could write some songs? Do I have a responsibility to say more? And at the time, there was so much going on in the country with racial stuff. There was so much political stuff that felt tied to the gospel for me. And so I said, and this is why if you go look at my timeline, there's a period of January or February of 2020 to about 6 months ago when I was very vocal about stuff that felt like gospel issues to me, but were political, were race-related things. Some people don't know, I've 4 adopted children. 2 of them are biracial teenage boys. And I care about race issues in America because they are at home for me. And so I spoke out hard for those times. And I got tons of attack, tons of pushback. And I did appreciate people like you who would come on and defend my character or whatever else. But I did that stuff knowing, this is going to make people upset. I know that. I'm not excited about it. I wish it didn't. But I have a responsibility because I have done some work in this area and I know how to tie it very clearly to my views on Jesus. So I'm going to talk about it, with authority, and I'm probably going to make some people mad. But that to me is, you said a minute ago, it's hard to get on stage and be vulnerable. It's hard to share. For whatever reason, there are lots of things in my life that are really hard for me. Like I could never do what you've done to assemble this or to learn how to use lights. None of that would work. Yeah. But getting on a stage and talking vulnerably or writing a vulnerable song is not hard for me at all. Like so much so that when I get complimented for it, I kind of feel embarrassed. Like, you're acting like that was really hard for me, and it wasn't. So don't compliment me for my hard work. It was easy for me, but something else would be really hard. Learning how to build a website would be like impossible for me. But being vulnerable, or like pushing a button, or like writing a provocative post about race in America and knowing I'm going to get pushback, that isn't. I don't get excited, but I'm not scared of it, and it doesn't feel hard to me. And so I lean into those things. And again, maybe this is a good circle back, is that when you find your lane, the cool thing about your lane is that it's something that looks hard for everyone else and isn't for you. Right? So it's a double bonus, because not only do you like doing it, but you look like you're really good at something that wasn't that difficult.
Right.
Right. And that's part of, for me, is like my whole ministry, my whole like calling is, hey, I have learned how to say difficult, awkward, thought-provoking things, and even vulnerable things, in a way that doesn't feel it hard to me. I'm going to lean in, because not everyone can do that. I can't do what Bart Miller does, or what Chris Tomlin does, or what Lauren Daigle does. I can do this, and I'm going to lean in and do it.
Yeah, that's good. That's the right way, and that's something that I hope to really get there and really have a full understanding for myself of what is that lane specifically. I'm in the process of finding it, and I think that part of why I built a so those of you listening or viewing, I built a podcast studio. I started a business, and part of it is I guess maybe in some way, initially when I first started making music, I wanted to reach people like me because a lot of the music that I listened to when I first became a Christian was like, it was cool. It was very similar to like I had that 90s grunge vibe, like I had listened to. And basically it was like, I want to make music for people that wouldn't be caught dead listening to Christian music, because I was that guy who wouldn't have been caught dead in a church.
Right.
So it's like, I want to reach those people. And now that I feel like I'm doing that, but I'm also reaching a different group of people I never expected to. Right. And in some ways I almost feel like me, and I'm trying to figure out, am I supposed to be the mouthpiece of saying the things that they want to say, which is which can be problematic, can be controversial, and just like I'm just in a weird evolution where, I was part of a church back on Long Island where I was pushing for them to be everything that I'm actually kind of against now. Right. Where I'm like, we need this and we have to do that and we should be doing this because they do that and then I've gotten to be part of churches that do all those things and I'm like, this ain't the way either. Right. Something's wrong, and and it's surprising me that I'm like, whoa. So I mean, I'm always in a journey and an evolution, and that's sort of, and it's hard for me as a guy who just releases singles, not entire albums like you, which one day maybe, but to go, man, I got so much more to say than I'm making moves, right? Or keep fighting. I want to talk about this, or I'm confused about this, or I want to know more about this. How do I do that? So, and I know social media is a difficult place because even last night, I got myself a little bit of trouble by just sort of going, hey, I think this is ridiculous. And then it turned into a thing. Right. And it's like, okay, and I'm just trying to be me and be a little wise guy and snarky or just silly just to try to be diffuse it, but also be like, I still don't get it. Right. But it didn't come out that way. It came out the wrong way. So it's like, dude, podcasting is hopefully a medium that helps find that lane of, I want everyone to understand that, hey, man, I'm on a journey too. Right. And just like everyone else, let's figure this out together. Me and the guest, me and the listener. Guys, I'm not here preaching to y'all. I'm here going, I'm learning. I'm messing up. I'm tripping, falling, dusting myself up, going, oops, sorry. Yeah. Hope y'all forgive me. And and
there's an episodic kind of loyalty that you can garner doing this that social media does not allow for. Right. Unless you're tweeting, Facebooking so much that you get like a real following, which I don't think either one of us really has. Like that's the kind of guys who are like, it's like the players. And those people even, like I always think about Benjamin Watson, who's that former NFL player who's a Christian, black Christian, but he's in the middle on these political issues. He's very, very pro-life, and he speaks a lot about race stuff. And man, that guy gets killed. He just gets killed, and he just gets over it. He's okay with it, or whatever. He just ignores it. And I'm just not. I don't want to have to deal with Should I answer that question? That's a very, very offensive or angry or sort of that they ask a question and now it kind of needs to be answered. And,
Right.
But I don't want to do, I just don't have time for that stuff.
But again, the problem is, and you wrote about it in your song, people want to just attack.
Yeah.
Because it makes them feel like the hero.
Well, sure. And at some level, what we're doing is that when we're posting that,
Right.
we're pointing out something wrong with the world and being
Sure.
like, am I the first person to do this? This is cool. I'm
Yeah.
in my circle. I'm the one that's exposing this problem. And you said a dopamine shot, there's something kind of pleasure about it. And I just, like I said, when I'm doing stuff like that, I just always think, at the end of some days, I will have days where my whole day feels like the highlight of that day or the sort of red mark of that day is social media. And those days are failures.
Yeah.
Period.
I agree.
Unless I'm selling something that like makes my bills get paid or unless I'm changing lives for Jesus eternally.
Right.
I know it sounds dramatic. It's a Jesus juke, but I'm just saying if my whole day was fighting with people over some stupid crap that didn't have anything to do with, your thing yesterday, I would have been like, oh, why did I do this? That's how, I'm not saying you should. I'd be like, what? This doesn't matter for anything.
Right.
There's no reason and I had to deal with all these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
I just
get
don't
that.
want any of that. I don't.
Sure.
And if you do, that's your business. But I don't have enough extra margins in my life, in time with my children, in money, in anything.
Yeah.
To say it was worth it. And occasionally I'll look at my wife after a day like that, and some look in her eye, I'll be like, that's how you spent your day, huh? Cool. I'm glad we moved to Nashville so that you could be, spending your day fighting with people about something on social media that doesn't change our lives.
That is a powerful, powerful perspective to look at it.
The end.
Oh, Ross, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me very much, sincerely.
Yeah. Always awesome chatting with you, writing with you. So how can people connect with you who are listening?
Ironically, social media is where they'll find most of this stuff. But, just look up my name, Ross King, on Spotify, on iTunes and Apple Music and Amazon, and rosskingmusic.com is a website that's not very put together, but it's there. But yeah, chase me down and connect. I'm not a very hard person to find. You can find me anywhere. So
all right. Well, thank you, Ross King. All right. Thank you.